Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Jason, please call.
Mr. Bono?
Yes.
Albrecht? Clues?
Here.
Scaramo?
Here.
Ricky? Here. Warnzak? And Gorecki? Here. I have a quorum.
Well, welcome everybody here to the special meeting on the IDA. There are a few things on the agenda here. First one, agenda number 3, the project housing. There's an application for financial assistance. That's up pages 1 through 27 in your packet. John, you want to?
Sure. First, I'd like to welcome Joe Scott from Hodgkin Russ, attorney acting as special counsel and bond counsel for 3 projects that we all voted on at the last meeting. Their group has also been very supportive. Their group has also been very supportive in a lot of other projects, including the Quackenbush facility where we had the rock star of the firm, Chuck Malcolm, on board for that.
That was a great opening. I sit at Chuck's feet.
Yes.
You're the backup band.
I'm the backup. I'm on the B side of the record.
But we were fortunate enough, it's got to be 3 or almost 4 years ago that myself and Jim Bono met you because I'm at an EDC conference in Albany. And we reached out to the executive director there and asked them who we should talk to about some of the issues that we're having, especially with Quackenbush. And we got the opportunity to start talking with Joe then. Joe and his firm are also responsible for the CRC LDC that will be forming very soon. We're very close. We just now need, I believe, to have just the one kickoff meeting, and I think we're all set. All the documentation's in place. So as every project, we give them different names until we're able to say who it is and what they are. So we're just calling this project housing. And so maybe what we'll do is turn it over to you for a little bit of background since you're involved closely with the firm that's looking to do the project.
Sure. And what I'll do is I'll start with page 1 of the handout, which is page number 1 at the bottom. They filled out an application. What they're doing is acquiring that facility and then doing a rehab to it. They made application to the IDA for assistance. The assistance that they're requesting is really, I would describe it as 2 baskets: a federal basket and a state basket. The federal basket is issuing bonds by the IDA to do the financing for the project. And because the project qualifies for tax-exempt financing, that does provide them with some significant benefits because they're going to be able to borrow it at a lower interest rate. The second basket is exemption from New York State taxes, sales tax, mortgage reporting tax, and they're also looking for a pilot agreement. And what is being considered today by way of action on the part of the IDA is an inducement resolution, which is farther down in your package.
It's on page 28.
And what that is preliminary action with respect to the project. So what I thought I'd do is I would start with the application. So I guess we go back to page 1 and you just flip through this a little bit. As John indicated, I do have experience with this development firm. They've done in upstate, they've done a project in Ulster County. That's one of our IDA clients. They've done projects in the Capital District, City of Albany, sure I get this right, City of Albany, Waterville, Hose. And we handled all of those. We're not their counsel, we were the IDA's counsel. So we represent the City of Albany, we represent IDA, we represent the Hose IDA, and we also represent Albany County IDA. So they did those projects through that IDA, and they were very similar to what's being proposed first year.
Did they bond there as well?
The bonding there on those projects was through a state agency.
Oh,
So this is actually better for you. They're bonding through the local.
is it better for them as well?
I think it is because my experience generally, and who do we have on? Do we have anybody on?
Just do we have more than Bob Holland?
Newspaper.
We have a newspaper person.
And then,
Yes.
yeah. I mean, at the risk of being critical of state agencies, which I do not want to do because we represent some state agencies, typically the local agencies are a little bit more nimble and more responsive in terms of time. So that's the advantage. In terms of interest rate, a bond issued by the Dormitory Authority, a bond issued by the county IDA, it should be the same interest rate because it's the same borrower. Ultimately, that's repaying the bonds. If the Dormitory Authority issues bonds on behalf of this entity, or the IDA issues bonds on behalf of this entity, it's really the same credit. It's the same repayment stream because the entity it's the same borrower.
So as far as an investment banker, this is a $15 million project. It's kind of small to most firms to bid on this, to deliver these bonds or to underwrite it. How would you, I mean, you're talking the bond authority or the Thruway Authority, they're huge. And so I just didn't.
That's true too, but it's surprising that even the Dormitory Authority does $8 million transactions, $10 million transactions. You're right,
Yeah.
in the grand scheme of things, because what you read about in the newspaper is the 50 million, 80 million, $100 million transactions being done by state agencies. But we're actually working on 2 library transactions with the Dormitory Authority where we are bond counsel to the Dormitory Authority. And both, they're 2 separate transactions, and one is 12 million and the other is maybe 15. So state authorities do these smaller projects.
I worked with the Dormitory Authority when this was talking about. It was way smaller than what we're talking now. It was under $1 billion.
But that wasn't bonding though.
No, it wasn't binding. But I'm
Yeah,
just saying,
it was
they'll
other
get involved in
finances.
smaller projects.
I think that we could be more receptive as far as timing, and all of our fees are not the same too. We will have less fees, so it's more advantageous for them. And that's why we supported Joe and his firm for the other 2 projects as well, because of the bonding.
Because it's been a while. I don't remember the last time we issued bonds.
It was for Feldmeyer, right? Or was it ELG? Hale, yeah, the first Hale way back.
Yeah.
So, but are we gonna run into any issues with the limitation of the amount of money we can bond because of the 3 projects?
We may, and the 3 projects are all different bond financing, which is actually kind of interesting also. You want me to go into that? Or do you want me to
I
continue?
don't think so today. I was just curious if we run into it.
There may be, but those issues are primarily issues of the development. And I guess, why don't I touch base on it for at least a minute? The nursing home project is a 501c3.
We can't mention the other one though.
Okay. I'll say it's.
It's a manufacturing.
Company C. So the nursing home project, that's a 501c3 project, and there's no bond limit on that project.
Oh, okay.
So there's no issues there. This project is for tax purposes described as a low-income housing project, and there is a limit. And their council has already talked to the state about getting additional bond volume cap. That's the terminology, cap, for this project. And then for the manufacturing project, we will need additional cap for that also. But because there's candidly so few manufacturing projects being done in upstate New York, there won't be any problem getting volume cap for that. The state will install right all over itself to give you what you need to do that project. So what I want to highlight in the application is on printed page 3 at the bottom, and that outlines the costs, and you'll see that the total cost is approximately 24 million. As you pointed out, the amount of bonds requested is approximately $15 million. If you go to page 28, sorry, page 29 of your materials, and if you look at the second whereas paragraph, we describe the project in that second whereas paragraph, and about 2/3 of the way down, I have the bond amount described. And you'll see that I have it, described as $15 million, but I have an amount not to exceed because I'm not sure what exactly the actual amount is going to be, and the amount of additional financing that they're looking at on page 3 may be financing that comes in later on and take down the total amount financed. So what I wanted to do is provide you and them with flexibility. So getting back to page 3, I think the rest of it is fairly self-explanatory in terms of how they allocated the money. I think assuming that we forward, John, with the inducement resolution, which authorizes the holding of the hearing, we should have them come in, make a presentation regarding the project, talk about how they're going to do the renovation. Based on my experience with them and other projects, it's kind of interesting. They go through floor by floor, and I don't know how many of you have had a kitchen remodeled, and it's a 7-month process. It can be difficult. They fly through these things. They have a crew that comes in. They've got a plan for the bathroom, a plan for the kitchen, a plan for the other rooms, and they just go boom, just like that. They minimize dislocation. They minimize dust. They minimize disruption to the inhabitants, the tenants, because they want to keep the tenants happy. And we actually, in some of these other financings that we did with them, some of the tenants would come in at the public hearing and talk about how they were initially worried about what the impact of the project was going to be on them. But after listening to them and having them bring in the professional teams that were going to do the work, and also tenants from other projects coming in and talking to them, they were very satisfied with how things have been dealt. The only comments I heard from several tenants was, "I'm very happy with my circa 1950 kitchen. I don't want an update." But that I thought was somewhat amusing.
With the type of tenants that they currently have, I mean, is that going to stay that way? I mean, as I look at how are they going to, to get back $24 million? And I know we don't like to use the word low income.
But that's what it is.
I know. So I guess the new word is just like in our business. We don't like to say junk bonds. We say high yield. So we don't want to say what we want to say affordable housing. Is that going to stay the same?
Yeah, exactly. That's the conditions of the bond financing, and there'll be federal subsidies assisting the tenants in paying the rent. So there won't be any dislocation.
So you believe the mortgage recording tax will only be $150 based on the bonding for right now?
Assuming that it's $15 million a bond.
Yeah, and then we also have to look at the tax, real property tax exemptions. We were looking at what we were going to see there, and we haven't seen any update on that yet.
Well, but
we talked, but we haven't seen a hard anything from them.
no, you're right. We haven't seen it with the higher number. That's right. Yeah. That's right. They offered, and that was the next, going into description of the what I call the state piece of this. As John indicated, there's exemptions from mortgage reporting tax, there's exemptions from sales tax, and then they're looking for a real property tax abatement. Apparently, you can back me up on this, apparently there's no taxes or pilot payments being paid on that property now.
There is not.
So the developer offered a pilot structure based on the amount of tenant revenue being generated at the site equal to 5% of that revenue, and they would make that as a pilot payment with respect to the project. I discussed it with John. They outlined those numbers in a subsequent spreadsheet.
I don't think it's in here, is it?
I think the 5% is.
Yeah.
Who owns the building now?
I have no idea.
Are we able to?
Reynolds Inc.
I don't know if it's through the authority or not.
Their
Right,
gross rental income is
Yeah.
1.8 million.
So the proposed pilot is on page 27. The pilot number there, the 67,000 is a 5% number, and if you go back to the spreadsheet, yeah, 10 and 11. 13, yeah, so if you go.
It gives you exactly what they're saying their profit is.
Right, and then their net cash flow is also described at the bottom of page 11. So we countered because my one of our clients, the City of Albany IDA, has as part of their UTEP policy a 10% shelter. It's called a 10% shelter rent pilot structure, where they collect 10% of the rental income generated by the project, not 5%. So we countered. I discussed this with John. 110. There was some back and forth with them, but they ultimately accepted the 10%. So we do need updated spreadsheets. But that obviously, doubles the amount described on page 27, and reflects a significant increase in what's being collected at the site now.
When we first reviewed this, it was too low, and then with everything that we're doing and the community should get back, I mean, there's things that happen there, so we need to get the village, the town, and the county and the school district some additional revenue, so.
So we're gonna see an updated
Yes,
projection.
yes, that it's gonna be that. Before we move, I mean, we're gonna vote on it today, but we're gonna say with the updated pilot schedule.
Absolutely. So then moving to page 28, which is the actual resolution. And the key to this this discussion is the language at the very top of the page, preliminary and inducement. This is not a final resolution. It's subject to a number of things, among them holding a public hearing, seeker review, and then there's a whole slew of conditions described later on in the resolution that I'll go through in detail. But the purpose here is basically just to start the clock, if you will, for moving forward on the project. It authorizes John and myself to move forward with respect to scheduling a public hearing and having further discussions with the developer on the project. So it just moves, gets the ball moving, if you will.
But we still need to vote and accept the application, correct?
Well,
Or is that
that language is really
is it, okay.
incorporated.
Did we get a fee already from them?
Yes.
How much did we get? 1,500? Or just 500?
I believe it was 500.
Well, if it's housing,
It's after we started to collect those upfront, right?
500
okay.
with the application.
Well, yeah, we're gonna have one resolution.
Any other?
Well, do you want me to, I can take a minute and go through the resolution?
Sure,
Again, I
absolutely.
don't know how much, some of my clients want me to talk for 30 seconds on the resolution, some of my clients want to talk for 30 minutes on the resolution.
Well, I do enjoy the sound of your voice, I'll be honest with you. However, I believe, being your first time with us on a resolution, maybe a little bit of time just to go over so everybody sees the differences. Usually our resolutions are a verbal, sure, it's kept in the minutes, but I understand why we're doing it more this way for the bonding and everything else that we're doing.
Well, then let me focus my attention on page 31, which is really the meat of the resolution. So section 2 says what we're going to do. As I indicated, that kind of at the introduction of the resolution, subject to all sorts of conditions. Well, right at the first sentence is, says following full compliance with the requirements of the act, including holding a public hearing. We're going to do the following. We're going to authorize the issuance of bonds. We're going to acquire an interest in the project. We're going to appoint them our agent to renovate and construct. We're going to lease it back to them. And then they are going to make payments with respect to the amounts due for the bonds. They're going to pay all costs incurred by the IDA with respect to the project. And toward the bottom of that paragraph, section 2, starting with F, it's 2, 4, 6, 8, it's 9 lines up. We talk about the financial assistance exemption from sales tax, mortgage reporting tax, and real property tax. But any real property tax abatement is subject to their obligation to make pilot payments. So that's section 2 is what we're going to do. Section 3 is what is the conditions, and you'll see that section 3 I think is longer than section 2, which is what my job is and your counsel to make sure that you're protected in this transaction. So moving forward, it's subject to seeker, subject to holding a public hearing, subject to the execution and delivery of documents that are satisfactory to you and counsel, namely me. C, agreement among the parties with respect to the terms of the bonds. D, agreement on the pilot payments. E, if the bonds are going to be federally tax exempt, we need to go through process, including a public hearing and the approval of the bond issue by the county board, because these are tax exempt bonds that we have to go to the next your governing board to get approval. And then, as John had talked about, volume cap with respect to the project that's described the last couple of lines in on that page. And then at the very top of page 5, where there's a carryover with respect to conditions, if given that you don't have a policy for low income housing projects, this is a deviation under your pilot policy. And so we'll have to follow your deviation procedures under your UTEX with respect to notify the taxing jurisdictions. And I don't think there's any local approvals. It's just
it's just
a
us. Yeah, it's just public.
And I just can't remember whether you got to notify in 14 days.
Okay. Do you remember what it is, Stace?
I did look into that. I didn't see an actual.
Date, actual time.
Yeah.
Okay, well, and the statute is, believe it or not, the statute is silent. It used to require 30 days, and then there was an amendment a couple of years ago, and that 30 days got dropped out, frankly, inadvertently by the state legislature, which is fine because it gives us more flexibility. The balance of the resolution are items that protect you. For instance, there's findings in section 1. Section 9 authorizes John and the staff, the staff and myself to hold a public hearing. And that's really a summary of the resolution. And again, so the important takeaway for you is that what this is a preliminary step. Gets the ball moving, subject to it with conditions. And it's an important step because it authorizes us to move forward with respect to the public hearing and other procedural actions. But we come back to you for any final approval.
Now, part of our application is we receive fundings at inducement. Half, right? 50%. What is it under there? In their application.
Yeah.
50%, I believe, at inducement.
Yeah, so I need to review that, make sure that we're all clear on that. Then I'll notify.
Okay. Now, also, everyone needs to know that Joe's fees are paid
Yes.
for by the client.
Exactly.
Not by us.
Because you're the client.
That's true, yeah,
They're
by
paid
the-
they're paid by
The applicant,
Yes.
all by the applicant.
We hire them and fire them, but we don't pay them.
That's right.
That's a great deal.
It's America.
It's an enviable position to be in.
Who picks the bond maturities and the interest rate? You or,
Oh,
no, they do, yeah.
we implement. it's actually kind of so people say, well, does the IDA get involved in the negotiations of the bond terms? Well, we typically don't. We look at them. Back in the go-go 80s, I had a deal where there was a ski resort in upstate New York being financed by by a developer who had a mixed track record.
That was a nice way.
That was a very
Shady.
good way.
Go
That was
ahead.
a very good, because that was the word I was going to use. And the investment banker was going to sell the bonds $5,000 pieces to individuals. And we were very uncomfortable with that structure. And so we said, no, they need to be sold in $100,000 pieces. Number one, and number two, they need to be sold to financial institutions. And so the story there was a large mutual fund. And I'll tell you this after we're done with the meeting. In Western New York bought it, and ultimately 3 years later, the project failed. They sued the developer.
It's Rochester funds.
Good. So I don't have to talk to you after the meeting.
No.
But the bottom line was that there was no action against the IDA for some sort of fraud on the market theory, which that was selling debt to people that really didn't have the investment acumen, if you will, to purchase those bonds. So, but it's very limited instances. So the short answer is very limited instances that we kind of get involved in that part of the transaction, because what we're doing really is facilitating financing. It's a financing between the developer and the investment banker, and the IDA steps in to bless it so that they can do tax against it.
This is a great time for the developer to do this, because interest rates where they're at, and with the Fed most likely to raise next year, this is when they might be issuing these bonds. What would you say, sometime next year?
I was hopeful, actually, fourth quarter, because our financials are fourth quarter for a calendar year taxpayer. But it's more likely a first quarter transaction.
Mike, you had a question?
Well, I was just wondering if, when everything is in place, when they do anticipate going in and starting the working on the project, the actual work.
Yeah, I would say first or second. But we can ask them that question when they come in. I discussed with John having them come in today to make a presentation. But thought that was preliminary. Needed at this point. We'll have them come in. Like I said, I think we should hear how they do it, what they're going to do, what the plan is, because I think that helps you do this. And it's an important part of your due diligence, right? Is reviewing this. And we'll structure the transaction with John. We'll have a clawback agreement. We'll have provide for the administrative fees.
But we're
pilot payments.
Yeah, our normal fee is 1%. We're not going to really deviate from that, of the total project cost, so. And that's outlined in our application as well. Yeah, we don't waive from
I
that.
know it's not our problem. Are they going to start the project in its entirety, do it in its entirety, or are they going to do are they going to displace people?
Well,
That's
this place.
I think
Well,
it's typical.
well,
where you-
temporarily.
And I'm not going to be honest, I don't remember that level of detail of the presentations that I heard, but it was, and that's why I made that kind of joke about the 7 months doing your kitchen. It's not, it's literally a boom, 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 boom. They move people around in the building because they need to have the area clear, but it's a very fast, and the whole idea is not to move people out of the building because it costs them.
Yeah.
Obviously, and it makes people nervous and upset. So what they try to do is move people into vacant, units and then move them back in. But those are good questions to ask them when they're
We're setting up some rooms. Quiet.
I think it would be beneficial for them to come in and the entirety of the project, and I'm sure that they'll be presenting it to other, well, perhaps, I don't know. depending on what sort of other approvals they need, but I think it's helpful to know who our partner here, who our contractor, you know, just those sort of things with the impact on the immediate area is.
Questions, comments? Good for a, we need a motion for the inducement resolution.
Well, for
Right,
this,
or you
for
want-
this
you want-
preliminary inducement resolution stated on page 28 of your packet. So it's gonna be everything together.
And in draft form, correct?
Right now until we get the finished pilot.
right?
So you want to set, you want to-
They're all together now.
Right.
Yep. 'Cause that'll allow us to set the hearing.
Need a motion. A. Ricky, second by Ann. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Keep it in a roll call.
Roll call. Call the roll.
Bono,
Yes.
Luce,
Yes.
Scarano,
Yes.
Mornzak,
Yes.
and Gurecki.
Yes.
Ricky?
Yes.
Motion passes. Thank you.
Well, he's gonna hang anyways, because he's gonna utilize what we have
Yeah, I
here.
have a 9 o'clock meeting
Plus,
in Kingston.
Well, then enjoy it, Joe.
plus we're gonna go into executive session where we can talk about a different project quickly.
Okay, let's go to item 4, water infrastructure improvement. It's on pages 35 and 36. This is Dollar Joe project. And
Sure. So there's a limited timeline to the WIA grant, and we reviewed it with the state and with GHD Consulting and Leanne West and the village of Dolgeville. And we need to retain some services for GHD. They came in one price, but they did lower it down to $8,700 to help us with this grant. It'll be, you know, well over $1 million if we win it. After our conversations with the state, I feel much more comfortable. So I need approval to move ahead to hire GHD. Once again, the grant is due on November 22nd.
No, you said the grant is due November 22nd.
Yeah.
That's when, explain that date, so,
That's the day we push the send button on the
Okay.
grant.
all right.
anyone else? The motion. Dave?
I was commenting on his send.
Oh, it is. That's what it is too. You put all this crap and then you hit that button and it's gone.
Open goes.
Need a motion on hiring GHD.
I'll make the motion.
That's Morano, second. Mike, any discussion? All in favor, aye. Any opposed, nay. Carried.
The next one is we need to be a lead agency for seeker for the project. We already received all of the approvals from all the other agencies, including the village and the town.
Motion, please. Kate, second by Ann. Any discussion? All in favor, aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, nay. Carried. Item number 5, the Herkimer County Micro Enterprise Grant, Jones Family Farm once again. Some more, John?
Yeah, what happened with our micro enterprise grant is we awarded someone else some funding. They were unable to utilize it at this time. Our grant closes out next month. We reached out, Victoria reached out to the state. They told us, well, we could give it to another award winner. Jones Family Farm, we reached out to them. They are also leading edge award winners. Victoria has been working on that. They came back and they are looking to buy a tractor, well, actually a manure spreader for those who speak proper English. And they submitted their quote. It's in your packet. Usually this would go through our loan and grant committee. However, since you've already approved them for the other amount, this is just a addendum to it. So we're looking for support on that so we can then close out our micro enterprise grant.
Need a motion? And second. Kate, any discussion further?
Can I ask who's the one that didn't need the funding?
You can ask. I don't know what's their name.
Gia's Wet Farm. in Jordanville. They were gonna purchase a
Sausage.
sausage stuffer.
Or meatball maker.
Meatball maker,
Oh, really?
but he
I
could not
approve.
find, he could not
You
find.
already did.
What he needed. So we were able to draw down some funds for them, so they were able to get some of the equipment outlined in the application, but not all of it. So
When he originally did the application, he found stores, they sold it before he had the opportunity to buy it. Executive session to discuss.
Just a minute, we had to vote. All in favor, aye?
I,
Any opposed, nay? Now, we got motion to go into session to, voice of council.
Yes, definitely.
Gabriel, second. Mike, please, thank you. Any discussion? All in favor, aye? Opposed, nay? We are. in session. Like